This is big.
State can't make everywhere a sensitive place. You can't go hiking in some places and not be able to defend yourself against somebody that you run into.
There is a difference between states deciding how they want to regulate any number of things versus stripping people of their rights to self-defense.
We want to see Congress pass laws that will help reduce crime without infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens.
The Supreme Court today handed down a major victory for gun control advocates.
It also puts state laws in jeopardy that are similar to this law.
Gun stores across America are experiencing something that hasn't happened in decades. Shelves that were fully stocked just weeks ago now sit empty, and retailers can't restock fast enough to meet demand. The reason behind this unprecedented surge traces back to a single Supreme Court decision that fundamentally transformed the landscape of gun ownership in America. The legal foundations that have governed firearm restrictions for nearly a century just crumbled in a matter of days. What started as a routine court case has evolved into a nationwide phenomenon that's reshaping everything from state legislation to individual purchasing decisions. The ripple effects are touching every corner of the country, creating opportunities some thought would never exist while simultaneously generating confusion and uncertainty that has everyone scrambling for answers. For the past 90 years, courts across America operated under a simple principle when evaluating gun law challenges. The government would cite public safety concerns, judges would nod in agreement, and restrictions would remain in place. This predictable pattern created a legal environment where challenging firearm regulations felt futile. That entire framework just got demolished by the Supreme Court's recent ruling. The new standard established by the court represents a seismic shift in constitutional interpretation. Rather than allowing governments to justify restrictions based on contemporary safety concerns, they must now demonstrate that any firearm regulation has historical precedent dating back to the founding era. This requirement has sent shockwaves through the legal community because many current restrictions simply cannot meet this stringent test. Within 72 hours of the decision, 14 separate lawsuits emerged in states with restrictive gun laws. These aren't minor challenges targeting obscure regulations. They're direct assaults on foundational policies that have shaped gun ownership for generations. Magazine capacity limits, assault weapon bans, permitting requirements, and approved firearm rosters all face immediate legal jeopardy under this new framework. The immediate aftermath has produced sales figures that defy conventional market patterns. One major Texas retailer reported processing more transactions in a single week than they typically handle in an entire quarter. The FBI's background check system recorded over 2 million checks in just 10 days following the ruling, representing a 340% increase compared to the same period last year. These aren't holiday shopping spikes or seasonal fluctuations. This surge stems directly from the legal transformation.
Will allow scrutiny for all gun laws pertaining to everything: assault weapons, age restrictions, restrictions on magazines.
The government may not regulate individuals' possessions of weapons for self-defense.
But public safety concerns must be addressed in ways that are lawful.
This is an issue that every gun owner should be concerned about, and we in Congress should be concerned about it too.
For the Supreme Court, it's all about language: reasonable suspicion, objective reasonable belief, or probable cause.
What makes this buying frenzy particularly noteworthy is the type of firearms moving off shelves. Previously niche or specialty items that casual owners rarely considered are now selling at unprecedented rates. Manufacturers who planned production schedules based on historical demand patterns find themselves scrambling to adjust to this new reality. Some factories are running 24-hour shifts trying to meet orders that continue pouring in. The geographic distribution of these sales tells an even more interesting story. California, New York, and New Jersey, states traditionally associated with low gun ownership rates and strict regulations, are experiencing demand levels that rival traditionally gun-friendly states. Dealers in these restrictive jurisdictions report customers specifically citing the Supreme Court decision as their motivation for purchasing firearms they believe might become unavailable if legislators find ways to circumvent the ruling. Perhaps the most surprising element of this surge involves who's actually making these purchases. 43% of firearms sold since the ruling went to first-time buyers, according to point-of-sale data compiled across 12 states. This represents the highest percentage of new gun owners entering the market since the pandemic-driven surge of 2020. These aren't traditional gun enthusiasts expanding their collections. They're individuals who never seriously considered firearm ownership until legal barriers they assumed were permanent suddenly disappeared. The demographic breakdown reveals fascinating patterns. Women now constitute 38% of new buyers, up from 22% in previous years. The fastest growing segment includes people aged 25 to 35 purchasing their first firearm specifically for home defense. Training courses in major metropolitan areas are booked solid for months, with waiting lists in cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, and Boston extending well into next year. While new owners flood the market, established gun rights organizations have launched coordinated legal campaigns targeting the most restrictive state laws. 37 active federal lawsuits now challenge various state regulations using the Supreme Court's language as their foundation. 3 weeks ago, that number stood at 6. These organizations, having built substantial war chests over years of preparation, are unleashing resources they've been holding in reserve for exactly this moment. New York's concealed carry system, operational since 1911, faces its most serious legal threat ever. Plaintiffs argue that requiring citizens to demonstrate proper cause before carrying firearms violates the new constitutional standard. California's assault weapon roster, which bans hundreds of firearms by name and feature, confronts challenges in 3 separate cases. New Jersey's magazine limits, Illinois's firearm owner identification requirements, and Massachusetts's approved gun list all face immediate legal assault. The attorneys coordinating these challenges employ identical Supreme Court language across every filing, creating a unified legal front that makes it difficult for states to defend their restrictions using different arguments in different cases. This strategic approach could result in rapid changes to state laws that have remained unchanged for decades. However, this legal transformation creates complex compliance challenges nobody fully anticipated. State and local law enforcement find themselves trapped between federal court decisions declaring laws unconstitutional and state legislatures that haven't yet repealed those laws. Officers must decide whether to enforce statutes that federal judges say violate constitutional rights, while those laws technically remain on the books.
Any law enforcement officers in California, including feds, you are absolutely prohibited from enforcing restricted magazines ownership in California, regardless of when they were purchased.
The panel's majority ruled Friday that the law banning magazines holding more than 10 bullets violates the constitutional right to bear arms.
21 years and older who are allowed to own a handgun will no longer need a license to carry it.
The bill allows gun owners 21 years and older to carry a weapon in Tennessee without a permit.
Red dot optic is just like this magazine. It makes the firearm more dangerous when it's misused, but it also makes the firearm work better.
When things sound really good for gun owners in court, that doesn't mean it's over.
Gun owners face their own version of this dilemma. Purchasing a firearm under a preliminary injunction seems straightforward until you consider what happens if that injunction gets overturned on appeal. Suddenly, legally purchased property becomes contraband, potentially exposing owners to criminal liability for actions taken in good faith reliance on court orders. Retailers navigate this uncertainty without clear guidance. The ATF has issued no official statements clarifying how federal firearms licensees should handle these gray areas. Some shops refuse to stock newly accessible firearms until receiving explicit written authorization from state attorneys general. Others require customers to sign extensive liability waivers acknowledging the legal risks of purchasing firearms in disputed categories. Throughout this chaos, one group's response stands out for its unusual nature. Politicians who built careers advocating for gun control have maintained remarkable silence. Beyond generic statements about public safety commitments, the typical rush to propose new restrictions hasn't materialized. This calculated quiet speaks volumes about the new legal reality. These politicians understand that knee-jerk legislation will face immediate challenges and likely fail under the Supreme Court's historical test. Such failures would demonstrate weakness to their base while potentially creating precedents that further strengthen gun rights. Sources within 3 state legislatures report that Democrat-controlled states are quietly consulting constitutional experts to craft restrictions that might survive judicial review. Gun control advocacy groups have withdrawn support from several high-profile congressional bills, recognizing these proposals are now facially unconstitutional. This strategic retreat represents acknowledgement that the legal landscape has fundamentally shifted. Rather than waste political capital on doomed efforts, they're recalibrating their approach to find constitutionally viable paths forward. This recalibration period provides gun rights advocates with a crucial window to press their advantage. Every day that passes without coordinated opposition allows more lawsuits to advance through the courts, potentially establishing precedents that will shape firearms law for generations. The transformation extends beyond immediate legal and political consequences. Cultural shifts are emerging as communities that historically showed little interest in firearms suddenly embrace gun ownership. Shooting ranges in urban areas report membership increases exceeding 200%. Firearms training instructors describe teaching students who 6 months ago would never have considered owning guns. Economic impacts ripple through multiple industries. Ammunition manufacturers struggle to meet demand, with some calibers experiencing shortages reminiscent of the 2020 buying surge. Gun safes, holsters, and other accessories sell at rates that have suppliers reassessing their inventory strategies. Even industries tangentially related to firearms, such as security systems and home defense products, report increased sales. Insurance companies grapple with how to adjust policies for a landscape where firearms ownership patterns shift rapidly. Some carriers have begun revising their actuarial models to account for the influx of new gun owners who lack the generational firearms knowledge traditionally associated with gun-owning households. Law enforcement agencies face training and policy challenges as they adapt to communities where gun ownership rates increase dramatically. Departments accustomed to operating in low ownership environments must reconsider their approaches to everything from traffic stops to domestic disturbance calls. The long-term implications remain difficult to predict. Will this surge in ownership persist, or will it plateau once the initial excitement subsides? How will states adapt their legislative approaches to comply with the new constitutional standard while still pursuing their policy goals? What happens when the inevitable appeals of current lawsuits reach higher courts? These questions lack clear answers, but one thing remains certain. The Supreme Court's decision has initiated changes that will reverberate through American society for years. Whether you own firearms, oppose them, or remain neutral, these shifts will affect your community in ways that are only beginning to manifest. The transformation of American gun law isn't just a legal story or a political battle. It's a fundamental shift in how millions of Americans relate to their constitutional rights and personal security. As this new chapter unfolds, staying informed becomes crucial for everyone, regardless of their position on firearms. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.